what you want to become ties into like, that future context is provided by, let's say my own experiences or like maybe some of your own. So let's get started with like, first of all, just this tiny bit of history. I'm not going to bore you too much. It's just going to be like a slide or two, just to give you a better idea. Oh yeah, before that, who am I? I should probably explain that a bit better. My name is Deven, and I am a Google developer expert for Flutter. So we will talk about the GDE program kind of a bit later as well. So I won't explain that for now. But my primary job is I work as a Flutter developer advocate at Stream. So mainly I work in the DevRel space, and I used to be like, a proper hardcore engineer, like for like 1.5, 2 years for Stream itself. But after that, it just like, with all these communities and everything exploding, I found it better to be in that community space rather than just in the pure engineering space. So I kind of loved being there. So at Stream, we kind of build a whole bunch of experiences. So we build chat APIs and feeds APIs. So we can integrate like you can integrate chat pretty easily in your app. So if you want to have some chats or Twitter feeds or whatever it is, a whole bunch of stuff you can do very easily using our APIs. So not going too much into that. This is not really a Stream talk. I'm not technically doing it for them, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. But it's a great company. It has a very strong DevRel culture, and it has like a really good Flutter support, which we have like really great engineers and DevRels from a whole bunch of places. So yeah, like that's what I do day to day. Apart from that, I also do a whole bunch of other things. If you ever have looked at Twitter, I'm always on there doing some kind of experiments. I publish I have a lot of libraries. I do a lot of Medium articles and stuff like that. So like, I started out with Medium articles. Again, much more context on that in the later part of the talk. So a lot of this kind of comes together like, in a very nice way. So we'll talk about that going ahead. But just before that, I want to give you some context on how Flutter itself kind of came to the version that it is, so we can understand how growth and stuff like that works in this domain. So yeah, like just historical context, understanding why Flutter came to be. So kind of look at the initial hurdles of what Flutter was doing initially, right? So this is what in 2015, 2016. So it's quite early on. It's very new, right? So Flutter itself is very new. And at that time, everything else was a very different kind of ecosystem. So native frameworks themselves were quite strong, meaning Android and iOS were quite well respected. There was very little challenge to their domination in that kind of ecosystem, where it was like you either do Android, iOS, and anything you did as a cross-platform app was a compromise. Like, whatever you did, Ionic, Cordova, whatever it is, it was kind of a compromise, and that kind of hurt a lot of companies, because either you were going with native apps, or else you were basically sticking with something that may not give you as good results. So so what are frameworks? So okay, so there's a small distinction here. So frameworks, when I say frameworks, these are like large, so it includes everything. So the tools meant for building apps, this is what I'm referring to as frameworks. So this might be Android, like native Android with Java or Kotlin. This might be iOS with Swift or Objective-C, and this might be Flutter with Dart and like with Dart, nothing else with that. So frameworks are like, a whole bundle of things which include code, the compilation tools, the ecosystem, like what you use to code it, and everything. So that's what a framework is. Very technically, if you're kind of pedantic about this, Flutter is not technically a framework, but it's something. But like, let's not go into that for now. Just assume it is. So when I say and second, when I say many cross-platform frameworks, if you look at Ionic or Cordova or whatever it is, they are ways to build your apps without having to do multiple apps, right? If you, for example, today you want to publish an app, where do you have to publish it? Android, iOS, and whatever n number of frameworks. So the issue with that is that you have to write code for each of these. You have to be good at each of that, or else you have to have a team for each of them. That is quite expensive. So when you had a lot of cross-platform frameworks, what they did was they introduced a way for you to create your apps without having to have so many code bases, so many teams, and that kind of stuff. So framework example is React Native, Flutter, native Android, whatever these are. These are examples of frameworks. So earlier, initially, there were a lot of cross-platform frameworks, and it was quite competitive in a sense, where it wasn't as easy to crack into it, right? Like it was very time consuming to develop and compete with a new kind of framework. So it was quite tricky. But Flutter was developed out of a new kind of idea, and this is the brilliant part. Um, if you have an Android phone, if you go to a new version of Android, you may have realized that it's not just the Android OS that looks different. The apps themselves kind of have a different look and feel. There might be new ripple effects. The buttons look a bit different. There's a whole bunch of different kind of accents and colors and stuff like that. So without even changing the app or upgrading the app, the buttons and elements and everything in the app itself look different, even if you've just updated the OS, right? And the reason is that an app developer basically goes and says that I want a button in the center of the screen. Android then tells the app, okay, this is how the button should look. And because of this, there are quite some constraints on developers who build these kinds of apps. Because now, if a new kind of button itself is introduced today, then no Android version before today can use it anymore. And Flutter's idea was amazing. What it said was, what if we actually tell the app itself how to draw this new button, how to actually paint that new button on the screen? And that was the brilliant part about this, is that it told the it like Flutter told the app itself, okay, this is how to paint the actual app on the screen. It does not ask Android anymore. It doesn't ask iOS anymore how the app should look. And because of that, you can have complete iOS like interfaces on Android and vice versa. And even you can have gingerbread, even something like under 2.3, and still have apps running which compete with standards today. So that's the brilliant part about this. Now, Flutter was developed with like this kind of ideal, this kind of brand new kind of thinking, and that was the brilliant part about it. And that's why today it can be adopted to many new platforms without actually breaking anything, because Flutter knows how to paint the app. It doesn't ask the OS anymore. And if you've heard of React Native, if you've heard of a lot of these base frameworks, there are small issues with those. So React Native, it was re-architectured, like it now kind of works in a different way. But before, React Native used to work in a very different way. It had a common language. I think it was JSX. So JSX was a language which basically said you can now define a button. Then it will go to either Android or iOS, depending on where the app is running, and ask, okay, I want a button. Fetch the OS button and display it on the screen. The issue was the problems of earlier still remained, but you added cross-platform functionality to some extent. That's why animations in React Native were quite janky initially, and there were a whole bunch of issues that came along with that. But by far React Native is the best cross-platform framework in that kind of Ionic Cordova kind of thing, because it is the most native in a sense. So React Native and all these frameworks had a very strong grip on it. And Flutter was initially developed as something called Sky. The initial name of Flutter was called Sky. And the best thing was the first commit into the GitHub repository of Flutter is called Open the Sky. I mean, that is the best name for a commit in a GitHub repo that I've ever seen. Okay, I mean, that is historic, right? If you write a book, that needs to be in it. And that's the thing. So initial hurdles, Flutter basically avoided them entirely. And this was the brilliant part about it. So when it was developed, it was quite slow. It took its time. And funnily enough, Dart, the language Flutter uses, it actually was developed way earlier than Flutter was. Okay, I remember back in 2013, 2014, I used Dart for the first time. And like there, it was a very nascent early language. It was trying to replace JavaScript. Flutter wasn't even a thought in somebody's head back then. So I remember doing it at that time, and there were lists later on top 10 worst languages to learn in 2015, 2016, which Dart topped, right? Number one was Dart. And it for good reason, okay, for a very good reason, because there was no application for that time. And when Flutter came along, now things have turned exactly upside down. So now that Flutter is there, suddenly you see articles which glorify it directly. You see why Flutter is the most popular cross-platform mobile SDK. And that article was on Stack Overflow. It's on the Stack Overflow blog. And if you look at the right, there is a comparison of Flutter versus React Native. So weirdly enough, Flutter and React Native roughly started around the same time. But Flutter took its time kind of feeling out what the direction might be. And the moment it found the right direction, the moment it found it, the right kind of momentum, the right kind of community, it just blew up. it looks like, Intel versus Apple Silicon, that kind of a graph this time, because you see this, stagnant growth and then immense growth once it actually finds its like, place in the ecosystem. So you see how fast Flutter has grown. And see, this is in percentage Stack Overflow questions. You might say that's a horrible metric. I agree. But go and look at any other metric then. Go and look at GitHub stars. Go and look at everything. So see, there is no such thing as a perfect metric. Right? You can't ever say, okay, this is better than this because of this exact thing. Won't happen, can't happen. And because of that, we use these kind of indicators, which is absolutely fine. So if you see, Flutter's current rise has been because of a whole bunch of things. It has been because of its community, because there's very helpful people willing to help out. It's because of people having a slight dislike for the Android development methods, because it was kind of clunky, it was kind of old, and it was a lot of the things were outdated, which they could not remove because of a lot of complex reasons. If I start about that, we are not leaving for 2 hours. The thing is, even with the new languages, even with Kotlin and everything, it does not solve a lot of the issues that Android had. And those are related to JVM, to a whole bunch of stuff, right? It's not, again, let's not start about that. But because of that, suddenly people who were kind of frustrated with a lot of other development methods, or did not like the cross-platform kind of methods that existed, suddenly had a different framework to see. And I was an early adopter. Like I said, I'll tell you more about that later. But I was an early adopter, and even though it was pretty bad at that point, I liked it because it represented a fresh idea. It represented a very fresh way of looking at app development as a whole. So today it is amazing. Today it is exploding, with even campus placements, even with like, so many things that I see. So many people that just come to me, how do we actually approach this interview? So many things that, you have that are that exist now, but just 2-3 years ago would have been unfathomable to some extent. So that's why I wanted to give you this context, where it is like, today there's massive growth. There's an immense amount of people who are doing it, an immense amount of companies and startups that are looking for it. So just keep that in mind as we go ahead. So second, I wanted to point out again, the main topic of this is still going to be like, like me kind of sharing my experience and like, a whole bunch of that stuff. But it's just more like, if you're already a kind of on that Flutter path, I just want to tell you 2 points as to how you can grow as a Flutter developer. Recently, I also gave a talk about finding a Flutter job. These were also mentioned in that, and I really find as maybe students or like affiliates of a university, I think this might be very helpful to you going ahead. So even if, let's say, you don't care about what I've done or what my life has been, it's more like at least you get something out of that talk, right? So that's the thing. I want to give you like the exact things what you should do if you're already a budding kind of full Flutter developer. You're already in this field, and now you're going towards the corporate kind of angle, right? Today you're going towards the corporate angle. You don't know what to learn. And that's what I kind of wanted to show you with this. So this is like just 2 slides, but like just I want to be quite specific with these 2 slides before we go very ambiguous later on. So just if you want, just take a screenshot of the slide or whatever it is. It's just that I've just kind of separated what you should learn as a Flutter developer going ahead, as basically the levels of jobs essentially. But don't treat this as junior, intermediate, senior kind of jobs. Don't make that kind of distinction, because with every company, what senior means is very, very varied. Okay, so senior might mean somebody who's just more experienced in the team. Senior might mean somebody who's very experienced overall. So it doesn't really make any sense. But if you want to start Flutter today, initially what you should do, definitely learn Dart. It's a very easy language to learn. It has a lot of Pythonic concepts, so you might just pick it up very easily. It's not very different to Java or whatever, but it's not too verbose either. It's not like you're writing code and you have like Java names that are this big and make no sense. So suddenly you don't have that verboseness of Java. You don't, but you also at the same time you have that Python. You have Pythonic lists and stuff like that, which are very easy to declare. So Dart basics, learn them first. Second, building Flutter UI. If you've ever started with Flutter, or if you already go with it, you use widgets to build Flutter UI. So when you're using widgets, you need to kind of it's a pretty new concept. If you haven't done React or React Native or whatever, it is the declarative kind of layout is a very kind of new approach to building a UI. If you've come from an Android background, you're used to dragging and dropping stuff on a screen, handling constraint layouts and like view binding and all that kind of stuff. Forget about it. It is a lot of stuff to unlearn and then learn when you are building with widgets. So building Flutter UI is a critical part. And then you learn these basic Flutter concepts. As an example, networking. How do you have HTTP REST calls? Then you have I won't say, I mean, you can try databases and stuff like that, but I mean, it's 50-50. It's common across everywhere, so don't worry about it. Then, what is stateless versus stateful in Flutter, that kind of concepts. If you don't know about it, like, just take a screenshot of the slide and, just go along. As you learn, you will easily get to know more about this. As an intermediate person, like, let's say, at middle kind of level, you have to learn state management. You might have a lot of questions regarding state management. If you don't know what it is, essentially, it's like, when you have a large app, you have data that needs to be everywhere. As an example, I'm on Amazon, I'm on Flipkart, whatever it is. I am adding an item to my cart. The first screen and the last screen should all know that I have items in my cart. So that data, that state, should be managed, and that should be spread across everywhere. And that is what state management refers to, managing data across your app. Then theming meaning a light dark mode kind of theming, very fancy. You click that light bulb and suddenly everything goes dark, which is much more difficult when it comes to actually implementing it. Like, you have to spend at least 2 nights crying to actually get it to implement. But like, but theming is a very important concept because it saves you a lot of time. Tomorrow, you don't want to declare that same color 20 million times. You have to declare it once and just use it across easily. Then there is navigation, going from one page to the other page, but also in a lot of different ways. Like, you need to learn how it works. Like, routing and navigation in Flutter is a very important concept. So again, won't go into too much detail, but it's a very important concept to learn. And testing. Personally, I left that topic out unless as far as I absolutely could. I did not like testing. I don't like testing today, but I've realized what the value of it is. One time, I was doing the UI for our SDK, which a lot of people use, right? Very significantly large companies use. It was it was vertically mirrored, and I did not realize that in my testing, and it went out like that. And yeah, on that day when I had to hear, let's say, a lot of colorful words, that's when I realized, it's difficult to write, but over time it saves you time. Over time it saves you the kind of, oh crap moment. Okay, there's something's gone wrong. Like, those moments are saved. Then that is what you kind of need to avoid. So I agree with the principle. I still don't like it, but I agree with the principle again. And when you get to an advanced Flutter developer, you need to know the underlying mechanics. Meaning, how does something that you write, how does a widget that you define actually translate to Flutter UI? You define a container with a color. How does that actually paint? You define text. How does it actually render? So that kind of thing, Flutter actually has 3 trees that actually paint this, and it is very amazing how it optimizes and everything. And for very complex interviews, this will always be asked. This will 100% be asked. So underlying mechanics are always important. Testing with CI/CD. CI/CD, if you don't know, is essentially like, if you push some code to a repository and you want to automatically build that, or you want to automatically test, you want to automatically, create an APK or an IP and then ship it to the app store. If you want to do that kind of stuff automatically, because one person can't do that always, then it's quite a bit difficult. And so I'll just come to your question, but like, last thing, plugins and package creation. If you write your own libraries, that means a lot more people can use it, and it gives you a lot of stuff in return as well. But to create, it's not difficult. It's just kind of different. So you should know how to create one. You should know how to create one, basically. So that's one part of this. And the second part is this, but just since it is kind of relevant to the point. So there's a question: why is it so that bigger organizations prefer to stick to Kotlin and Swift rather than Flutter? Okay, so the answer to that is that, look, these are mature frameworks. These have been there since 2010, 2011, right? These are very old, established, mature frameworks. You can definitely achieve everything with them. And honestly, I would say you can do that with Flutter now as well. But one, they don't have Flutter developers at all right now. So people who already have Android iOS teams don't know people who know Flutter. So it's not just a moment of, one day you're doing these and the second day switching. Second, there is quite a large development cost to switching overall, right? For example, the Google Pay app that you use is now written in Flutter. It was earlier written in Kotlin and Swift. But why did Google Pay switch to Flutter? Because it realized over a longer time, this saves us money. Even if we train our people, even if we rewrite the whole app, they wrote millions of lines again for Google Pay. And why that helped is because they realized over time, there's going to be very few people needed, a very small team needed to actually do this anymore. and that is a brilliant part. So we will get to it. Okay, so it's not, that is not the only reason. We will get to how it like in the third part. I will also like give you some more insight as to how this works. But essentially the framework is young. Second, there is a phase where you see these people starting to adopt these newer kind of frameworks, and you are already seeing it now. There are very massive companies who already adopted Flutter very wholeheartedly. I'll give you examples later on, but point is that is how it works, right? So and that is how it is. So that I think that somewhat answers your question for now, but we'll go into more detail later. About the debug console thing, I'll come to at the last because that's a more technical question. So any questions about state management, about debugging, about app size, whatever it is, just we'll keep it last, and we should actually go for just later on we should go for those technical-ish questions. Let's stick to this for now, and I'll get back to you. Right? Okay. So the second thing, what I really recommend to a lot of people is create your identity. It's not just about learning something; it's about actually people knowing you, right? It's like, they should know who I am. It's not just about I do something well. Okay, I'm really great for it. I might be really good at comparative coding, but unless I participate, it's not going to be good, right? I need to actually go out. I need to pick an identity. So you need to create content, or you need to participate in something or the other. So being reached out to is far better than reaching out. And like in there was an event GDSC, wow, and like I mentioned one thing there as well, where I said, if you approach a company, they're going to offer you 3 lakhs, and if a company approaches you, they're going to give you 30, because you have the leverage now. They have approached you, right? So suddenly you know for a fact that they know who you are, they know you are good, and they know that somebody else might have approached you as well. So they are not going to like cheap out on their offer, right? They're going to give you a good offer, so that they make sure the talent is in the company. And that's why you need to build an identity where people reach out to you. You develop your own personal brand. And I would advise you to at least start out with a individual community identity, meaning have an identity in the Flutter community rather than everything, because it's very difficult. Establish an identity in one, let's say Flutter, Android, whatever it is for you. Establish an identity and then branch out. That's fine. Don't try to do everything at once. You're like, as much as we like thinking we're superhuman, we still have 24 hours in the day. So we cannot approach everything at once. So keep that in your mind. So I won't go through this too much, but again, if you want, screenshot this, or we have it on YouTube apparently. So go for that. Read this back if you feel like it later on. But yeah, so this is not something that is very relevant, but I felt it was appropriate to include because these are two very critical parts: being good and being known, right? Okay. So now I just want to talk about really my own experiences with Flutter, with technology, and with the general semblance of the community overall, right? So I kind of split this across multiple kind of parts, which is like my individual experiences with a lot of different kind of things. Just to let you know, I cannot name a lot of individual companies I've worked with because of NDAs, but I will tell a general gist of what I was working on and everything, because that gives you a better idea of that. I will name a few as well, so that's fine. So the thing is, initially I was quite new to like Flutter, but this was not because, see, people have this idea that early adoption means that, okay, the people have to be really good at spotting what is new, what is going to be good, and that kind of stuff. You don't. I was just frustrated with Android. I was burnt out from my Android kind of job. It wasn't a job, but like I was burnt from just doing Android day in and day out. And the reason was that I have a lot of ideas. Okay, not very good ideas, but ideas nonetheless. So I have a lot of ideas. I like doing them. I like creating stuff. I like building stuff. That's like a passion of mine. And Android did not give me that velocity. So when I approached Flutter, it was mainly because I didn't like Android anymore. I was burnt out completely. So when I approached Flutter initially, it was very difficult to work with because it was very early on, right? There was no packages or tooling. If you work with it today, you have a lot of tools to reformat, to add very easy shortcuts, add widgets, wrap this with that. Nothing of the sort existed. Nothing of the sort. And the bigger problem was that documentation was near non-existent. Documentation did not exist. So I don't know what something is supposed to do. I had to find that out for myself. So initially, I wrote a lot of that documentation. Initially, I actually created the documentation, and somehow people started reading it because there's no other documentation. So I started writing because of this. I didn't write because I wanted to be known. I wrote because there was nothing else. And I realized, somebody will run into the same problems I do. And I don't want that to happen anymore because I know I've spent hours and hours on those issues, right? So it is quite difficult to deal with. And like I've mentioned here, weirdly, these things helped me more than they hurt me because I had to go and learn something without any help, and because of that I knew it better than anybody else did, because I had to go through the source code, I had to go through everything. And the kind of idea that gave me insight out of that thing was way better than somebody who just read some documentation and came back in, because I have run, I have ran through that issue and then I know. So it helped me more than it hurt me. So early adoption is a very, very easy, it's very good way, but it is a bet. It is a long term bet that you're making with early adoption. You are assuming that Google won't shut down Flutter tomorrow. You're assuming a lot of stuff. You're assuming that today tomorrow Flutter will grow and it'll have that. I did not know that. It for in hindsight it could have been a bad bet. I did not know that, but I felt that this gave me what I wanted, let on everything else, and it gave me what I wanted to develop and what I wanted, that velocity I needed. So that's why I really liked it. So I started doing a whole bunch of things initially. I started in 2017, but around 2018 it really kicked into the next gear where I started creating all of these. And some of these I created, like I said, because there was no documentation on it, like responsiveness, the third one, or just text fields and stuff like that. And some of these are now the most popular articles in Flutter as a whole. Like that text field one probably has 4,000, 400,000 ish views, 500,000, I don't know, half a million views probably. Like it is because so many people needed that. It is more about what people need than you being a great writer. So focus on actually creating content that you would use. Don't spam, don't copy, right? But it is okay to have your own opinion on things. It is okay to have your own perspective on things. And if you write something or if you make something that you yourself will use, that is, there's no greater joy. And when you're becoming, when you're going on that path, be sure that you are creating stuff that you yourself will use, you yourself like. Don't lie to yourself. You can lie to me, you can lie to everybody else, but don't lie to yourself about what you're creating. So I started with content creation, like with Medium and whatever, but you can start with anything you want. Okay, that might be dev.to, that might be YouTube directly, that might be anything. But understand that baby steps. Don't rush into it. Don't go too far without knowing, with when you know too little. Okay, and I'm not trying to play devil's advocate, but essentially when you have a lot of content, when you have a lot of advanced content, especially, which is required, you have to know what it is giving to people and what you need to know everything about it. You can't make content which is false, because if you make a lot of mistakes, that's going to come back to to haunt you. So I would suggest start with articles, start with small things. If you don't want articles, you can make projects, you can make libraries, a whole bunch of stuff. Don't worry about that. But start with some kind of brand building of your own. So I always help in my experience, in my experience it always helped. I don't consider myself the greatest writer. I don't even consider myself a good writer, but I know what I ran into and I know how to solve it, and that's all I needed to do it. So suddenly it helped me get to the place I wanted to be. So understand, be active in the community, whether that means on Twitter, on LinkedIn, whatever it is. Know people in the community, know a few people who are at your stage, who are already doing well. That network helps to get a lot of stuff, and that all of that begins with you having an identity. So content creation is a major thing when it comes to this. So that's one thing. The other thing I like to do is a lot of experiments. I have, like I said, I have a lot of crazy ideas, and I I just set myself weekend challenges where, Saturday morning I have an idea in my head, and Sunday night I want to release it. Right? That is my strategy, where I give myself a whole weekend and do something. So I, by the way, I obviously don't know, but I am a chess player, so I've been going through chess tournaments very early on through school, all of that. So chess was a particular interest of mine, and learn to tie in your interest to what you do. It is an amazing thing. I made the first chess library for Flutter itself very early on. Okay, It was quite bad back then. But very early on, I made the first kind of chess library for Flutter, where you could add a chessboard, have arrows on the board, and like board colors, that kind of stuff. I didn't do it because I was good at it as particularly. I did it because I liked it. I liked chess. And the funny thing is, the moment after I did it, 2 months later, two grandmasters approached me. They're like, okay, we want to develop this thing. Like, do you want to have? So one person who was the topmost, player of Jamaica, and one grandmaster who was from Spain, like Venezuela, but who had emigrated to Spain because of the Venezuelan thing. Um, and imagine, like, like I am now talking with two grandmasters. I'm nowhere near that level. Okay, like, so sorry, not even close. But I am now talking with two grandmasters developing something, which is completely new. And by the way, the chess world championships were like 1 month later, and I was getting like expert commentary on that WhatsApp group. So it was that I got to know so many new people. Like, and by these WhatsApp DPs, like one, like the Jamaican person, like his WhatsApp DP was a photo with Usain Bolt. Okay, like it's a different kind of league overall. So what happened there was that I ended up meeting people through a chess library. I ended up meeting many grandmasters. Like even after this, I because of them, I ended up meeting more people, and I ended up like having a chess community, like of very high level people without doing anything at all, right? Um, so that was one thing with the chess thing, right? And by the way, like through one of those grandmasters, I even got, so initially when Flutter was new, it is very difficult to actually get into that position, to actually have a job, because when frameworks are new, the issue becomes that companies, like somebody pointed out, a lot of companies don't want to adopt it because it is very new, it is not proven, it is not mature. Suddenly, um, you need somebody, even if even a small number of companies who adopt Flutter, you need a proper referral to get in, because they want already experienced people. And that one grandmaster actually got me into companies in, like in the US and in Jamaica, just through referrals, and I got, like a lot of my initial positions because of him. And that was a brilliant part. You never know where your connections come from as long as you keep building, and that is the most brilliant part. So along with that, like just a few of my experiments, I also do generative art. I make, with Flutter and with custom paint, I do mathematical art, just basically my takes on a Mandelbrot set, or my takes on, like a lot of like layered trigonometric art or chaos theory, that kind of stuff. So where you have Julia sets and stuff like that. So I did a lot of, like the second thing, the artwork kind of thing that you see is a Flutter app actually. So it's built completely in Flutter. And I, like, yeah, I mean, I moved into this place in January, and I'm like, okay, my own artwork hanging over the wall would be amazing. So it's that kind of thing, right? Because you have the joy of creation, you have the joy of, like and again, I am a person with horrible color palette choice. I am a person with I had a C grade in all my drawing exams, right? It's just that, but I knew math, right? I knew math, and because of that, I could create these intricate geometrical patterns, and I knew how to code. So I could do something which I was completely like incapable of doing a few years ago, and disappointed a lot of like drawing teachers. But today I have like that mathematical prowess to actually create a whole bunch of this stuff. And that's the brilliant part about it, is that you discover things which you don't know. I The third thing is, like, I am very fond of making games. I also have my own game engine built in Flutter. This was not using that, this was before that, but I made like Geometry Dash in Flutter. If you played it, amazing. That's the only game I like ever play. It's like, I recreated that. And why I love game development is because you don't know how much math is in game development. Okay, to get that thing to spin, you need to calculate so much stuff, and everything is math, right? I'm not even kidding. Game development is like 85% math and 15% showing something on a screen. Okay, it is that bad. So game development is always very, very challenging. Take it and do it, please, please. That is my one request from all of you. Like, try developing a game. You would be surprised at, if you're making Flappy Bird, you need to define what gravity is, what acceleration is, what velocity is. All of that you need to actually make sure that you need to code in the gravity. It is not made for you. It's not just like, you attach like some number, there is a thing, type it in, 9.8 is gravity, and the bird falls. No, you actually have to code everything. And that's brilliant part in game development. I made my own implementation of Minecraft, a very rudimentary one, but I made my own implementation of Minecraft in Flutter as well. It was like an early try into like 3D kind of graphics with Flutter. It's kind of, I haven't worked much on that because I've had so much else on my plate. But yeah, it's that kind of thing, right? Where you try these different kinds of things and you have experience in a lot of things. suddenly these things come to your help very well later on. Because when, like, I have had companies approach me because they're like, we love the work you do with custom painter and graphics, so if you're making a whole graphics engine in Flutter, would you like to help? We have these amazingly talented people. And while I couldn't accept because I already had job, it was wonderful. Like, all of these high level people I had to work with. The last one is one of my favorite things that I did. It was called Meta Flutter. It was a way to build Flutter apps on a mobile phone. And it is difficult to explain why that is difficult. It's related to something called reflection, but essentially, it was very, very difficult. And mine was like the first attempt to actually create. You could actually make a whole widget tree and actually render the full Flutter layout, and you could create it on a mobile phone. So I haven't developed it much afterwards, but it was one of the first things that I was very, very proud of. Right? It was it's like your baby, right? It's your mind baby. So you're very proud of it. And that's the thing, right? So I love creating stuff, and that approach is amazing. If you create stuff without really having any reason why, and I'm not, trust me, I'm showing like 1/10 of stuff here. I have, like, I love physics, right? I'm like a proper physics nerd. So I've had, like, things where I added gravity, like proper gravity to this thing, had gravity affect the positioning of Flutter widgets, and I had like a thing where a black hole goes through and Flutter app actually distorts the entire widget painting and everything. And how that began was because I was creating a magnifying glass kind of widget earlier for Flutter. And I realized, wait, if we can magnify, we can distort this entire layout in a lot of ways. And then I got working, and then I made like 4 or 5 things. And that's the amazing part. Like, when you let your imagination run away, but you have a tool that will help you do that. That is the perfect kind of mixture, where you have the velocity and the experience and the skill and the motivation. When you have all of that, you are going to create amazing stuff. And because of this, companies approach you, people follow you. And mainly because they know that even if you're not publishing something specific, they know how talented you are. So honestly, when, every time I've been in an interview, people have known me. Like, they have known who I was at the interview, and I've not had to do a lot of stuff in that interview. And that's a brilliant part. If people know you, you have a lot more leverage on them, where it comes to job interviews, direct compensation, whatever not. So that is like, those are my experiments. And so yeah, this is something I get an immense number of questions on. So what is the Google Developer Expert Program? Why is it there? Who gets in? What's the procedure? Blah, 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 blah. So look, there is a lot of weight associated with it. Okay. I'll tell you honestly, don't run behind the hype, because it's not really it's not an exam. It's not, you give this paper and then you now Google Developer Expert. It's not like that. So just to boil it down, this is the best way I could put it, like what I put on the slide. A program where Google supports the people who make a difference, support the people making a difference. So what that means is that you need to actually make a difference in the community and the people overall. You can't just be a good developer. That's not the actual goal there. They don't give you that title for being just experienced. They give you the title for making a difference with other people, right? That might mean creating tools, creating packages, libraries of your own, creating content. So, or talking a lot, like speaking at a lot of places, basically making a difference in other developers' lives, right? For that, you have to be good. You can't make a difference if you're not good at Flutter. And the second thing is you have to be known. How you are known, that is your story, that is your question. You won't be able to emulate my story, I won't be able to emulate your story. There are no two similar stories. Of the 5-6 people I know, like probably more, maybe like 8-10 people I know as GDEs, everybody has such a diverse story. And they don't, that's the unique part, that you will be, maybe tomorrow you'll do it without any talks. I had to do talks for it, and that kind of thing. You have to make a difference in your own way, because if you just adopt what everybody else is doing, then there's too many people. You're already in the saturated field. Don't worry about that so much. Make a difference how you can make a difference. Like I said, I like building stuff. Okay, I am not even claiming to be as good as the other people. That is not my thing. I'm not here to compete, right? I'm here to do my own stuff. I like building stuff. And through that, I accidentally, maybe, I end up writing stuff, I end up doing stuff, I end up making tools that I'll use, but that makes a difference to other people. And that is what you have to do. Along with being good, you also have to be known. That is a major thing. And I think you'll whenever you go to somebody, any GD kind of talk, you'll hear this sentence every time. where they will say that um, don't run behind GDE. GDE will come to you. That is partially true because you need a referral. You can't apply. You need a referral. Somebody in Google or another GDE has to refer you to become a GDE yourself. The thing with that is that understand, look, whatever GDE is, or you might and hear about some other programs, um, such as Microsoft Most Valued Professional, something with the MVP, something. Um, Other programs like those, you will hear about them. But the thing is, with those programs, that is a company, any company, okay, Google, Microsoft, that is a company just approving what you do. And don't worry about that too much. Don't worry about, that if people are behind you, or like if you will impress them, don't worry too much, because ultimately you will get in, you won't get in. But if you're good, if you focus on outreach and getting good at what you do, they will come to you regardless. And that's what they mean by that. Don't run behind it, because it's not an exam you have to give, right? It's not some sort of certification. You will not get a certificate for it whatsoever. So it's not something you can do and like just be there. But the main thing is, along with this, I would just add one more thing, which I did not add here, which is network. Please network. Know people in the community. Know everybody you can, and have genuine conversation. Okay, don't bluff your way into it. Like, if you show interest because you're interested. Don't just go and talk to people just because you want them to know your name. Ask what they do, because everybody again has a unique story. Ask what they do. Ask how they develop stuff. Ask how they got into it. And ask what keeps them motivated. Even if you ask that, you will form a bond with that person. That will be a genuine bond. So do that. Keep be good, be known, and have a good network. These three things, if you follow, it's more or less done. And the last thing, company experience. So okay, so this comes on to the one, like the one question that we had. In the initial days, there is little to no corporate experience, right? So when I initially started, I was on my own. There was no company approaching me, mainly because there was no companies approaching anybody. There was no companies in Flutter at all, because it was a very nascent framework. And except very early startups who needed something very quick, apart from that, there was nobody doing it. And that's why you needed, if you know Hamilton the play, okay, if you haven't, go to Hotstar, watch Hamilton the play. Amazing, amazing musical. But the musical in New York had an app, and that app initially was made in Flutter. That was the first demo example. That was the first demonstration of something that could be developed with Flutter, and that was amazing. So initially, like I said, not much interest, but slowly that framework lead reaches an inflection point where things kind of turn around. And once it hits an inflection point, what happens is that slowly small and medium scale companies start doing small experiments with it. So if you see Zerodha, or like a lot of these like companies in India started experimenting with it. There are also others which I have an NDA with, but you definitely don't and use those apps every day that experimenting with Flutter. Like I can tell you that I have directly consulted with at least 3 or 4 firms, where I gave them like how to migrate to Flutter itself. Um, Even if you know Yocket, if some of you are going for masters after college, Yocket is a famous app. Even that is now on Flutter. I was in their Mumbai office recently, just getting to the CEO and everything, and just understanding why they wanted to switch to Flutter. So there's an immense interest from startups and medium scale companies, and then that happens when it reaches an inflection point. And today we're at the stage finally where, after quite a lot of time, that Flutter is headed to mass adoption. Meaning companies are realizing that Flutter, unlike earlier frameworks, is genuinely challenging Android and Kotlin, Kotlin and Swift, and Android and iOS properly in their actual adoption. So for me, that like in the inflection point came when a company from Austin approached me. Two companies, one in Austin, one in Plano, both in Texas. So both of them approached me, and they kind of asked, we do some things in Flutter, and they were very varied. One was like a Doctors Alliance. The second one was called Bait Finder. It was like a aggregation of bait shops. Like fishing is huge in the US, right? So I had three companies I was working for, right? One was a bait shop aggregator, where it was like Swiggy but for fishing, basically, where you have bait shops, and and it was so varied. I was talking to a guy in Austin. I have never fished in my life. Okay, I have no clue. I used to I have never even been, I don't remember the last time I was in a boat. But the point is, it was very difficult. It was a very different kind of experience. Even the Doctors Alliance, I was like, okay. There was an organization who was doing charitable donations for religious foundations in the US. I worked for them for a while. There was an amazing company, which it was like a large Jamaican company, which involved sensory food tasting. Essentially, how do you kind of judge food on a proper scale? And like they had a food testing tasting app, tasting. I mean, where they had like a large cohort of people who would try a certain kind of product, scale it across multiple things, and so initial I have had such a varied kind of experience. And then even in India, like I haven't worked for a lot of Indian companies, if I'm honest, but in India, a very large car manufacturer, automobile manufacturer, I developed a lot of their supply chain management tools, where it was, so they take inventory and stuff every quarter, where they actually go to every single warehouse and actually scan all the parts and everything like that. I helped them develop a Flutter app for that, which didn't need Wi-Fi or anything. They could do it without any kind of thing, because they said it will take at least 5 or 10 CR to set up Wi-Fi across a campus. They had a huge campus. I had to take 2 hours. Like I had to take a 2-hour Uber just to go there for a 15-minute call. And the thing is, like, it was very annoying, but it was an amazing experience, right? They had, the canteen was made out of all car parts. It was like the chairs were like truck springs and stuff like that. So it was amazing, because suddenly it opened doors we didn't know existed, right? I got to know so many smaller companies that my experience in all these small industries is exploded, and that gives you a lot of personal experience in that. So I've worked for at least 7 to 10 of these small things, some of which I can't even mention. After that, I consulted for a lot of things. Even currently, I'm consulting for a peer-to-peer lending kind of company, a lot of companies who are migrating to Flutter, and a whole bunch of stuff. So amazing things. And then I in 2020, like COVID times probably, I got into Stream. So when I got into Stream, whatever else that meant, I understood one thing, that large companies are now starting to adopt Flutter. And that is the biggest thing. Toyota, Alibaba, eBay Motors, whole bunch of like this thing, Google obviously, but a whole bunch of large scale things. The Ubuntu canonical installer is now written in Flutter. The Ubuntu installer itself is in Flutter now. There is Toyota's dashboards and everything are being written in Flutter. Philips Hue, if you know, like the smart lighting, that is all in Flutter. And there's so many things which are not mentioned. And like I said, Flutter is now heading to mass adoption, meaning you'll see very large scale jobs. If you ever if you use Spotify, you may have heard that Soundtrap ad. Soundtrap is an app written in Flutter. If you've ever used ClickUp, a very new kind of Jira alternative, that's written in Flutter. So anything that's new, any startup that's new, is, I'm guaranteeing you, it is considering Flutter. Okay. So answering your question finally, people who are new, people who have nothing to lose from the transition, are considering Flutter as like almost 50-60%. People who already have a very large existing and possibly legacy code base, it is very difficult for them to switch to anything new, let alone Flutter. They can't switch to a modern version of Java. Okay. So it's a very, especially fintech and stuff like that, it is very difficult for them to use new software, because the entire systems are legacy software. And that is what you need to know about actual adoption. So, and last thing, understand that learning anything is a long-term bet. Do not expect it to pay off in 1 or 2 months, but with the right kind of effort, if you might work with companies or people you never thought of. Okay. Initially, my dream as well was working with Google or whatever, right? But today, that is not my dream. Don't I'm going a bit atomic habits here, but don't go towards goals, go towards processes, right? Have a process of learning, have a process of how you can understand, how you can implement, and how you can actually deliver to those specific companies. Even if you don't end up with who you're working with, you're going to gain amazing experience. I went from like cars to fishing to finance to doctors associations to religious institutions. I mean, stuff which I have had very little association with whatsoever. I ended up working for them. And today I'm working with a chat and feeds API, kind of service. Again, chat never worked on, and a whole bunch of stuff I ended up working with. But be open to those experiences. If you say no, if your only thing is no, I only want to get into Google, maybe you will. Okay, I'm not saying you won't, but that experience won't be as satisfying. because you will only go into their product, go into just end up working on one part of the thing, because it's a large company, they can't risk it. And whereas if you work with these smaller companies, gain that experience, and then get into these larger companies, that is going to be way more satisfying. And be open to these opportunities, and once your work shows for itself, it will be it will speak for itself. Essentially, people will approach you, and that is what the ultimate goal is. That have people approach you. Don't go approaching people. Approach knowledge. People will come to you effectively. That's the overall gist of the thing. But I think that's it. Yes. So that's it from this talk. I hope I have no clue how long it went. But if you have any kind of questions, you can ask now, obviously, or else if you have something later, just DM me on Twitter. My DMs are open at this link. I just drop a link in the chat because it becomes quite annoying to actually type that in. But just please give me some context as to where you're coming from. Like just say, okay, I'm from the GDSE session, like for a festival session, because I have a lot of DMs I haven't opened, because a lot of people just say hey and stop. I have no context as to how to continue that conversation. So just give me some context what your question is, and we can have a chat. So yeah, I've dropped the link. Feel free to just DM me when you need. I am currently a bit too busy, but I'll find some time over the weekend just to answer that. And yeah, if you have any other questions, drop into the chat now. And yeah, so I'll just answer the one that we had. Okay, so how to approach an error that occurs in the debug console. Okay, so now the critical thing is which error, right? Initially it is is it a UI error, is it something else? First of all, debug console meaning let's just take an error which happens generally, whether you're logging it, whatever it is. So let's just take that kind of error. When you have that, first of all, the Flutter errors have improved so much recently, and it almost makes you cry of pride, because it's like earlier it was so large. It was so large that it was unfathomable where the error was, and today it is much easier. Okay, so but also debug and your normal debug points and stuff like that, just the the lines you marked right effectively, they work very well. Second, Flutter, so how do you debug it? So Flutter has, I always forget the name, but essentially it has a it has a full oh, wow, I forget the name. But essentially you can monitor the whole app logs and whole app thing uh, from observatory. I think it's called dot observatory or something like that, where you can look at debug, you can look at each individual layer. If it goes too badly, you can look at the logs and stuff like that. And to be honest, don't be afraid to look at the source code. I am very afraid to look at the Android source code, but the Dart source code is a thing of absolute beauty. You can understand it. That's the main thing. So don't be afraid to look at the source code. First of all, understand where the error is from. First of all, avoid the stuff which will cause error. So if you're working a lot with streams, if you these errors a lot of times will be very hard to debug. And in that case, you work with things which give you more diagnosable errors. Make code if you use some obscure software, obscure state management solutions, it is very hard to say where the error is. And that's why having testing and stuff like that is very important. It's kind of hypocritical coming from me. I don't have a lot of testing, but you get the point. And then after that, Dart observatory. If everything fails, Dart observatory. Just watch. You can see paint layers going wrong, or whatever it is. You can see a very good kind of way. Like what went wrong, which widget went wrong. Everything is in a very defined kind of format. But for example, but the thing is, your question is a bit vague. So if you have a specific thing you have, for example, if you get an error now and you can't debug that, just drop me as a DM from me, and we can look at that, because the question is kind of vague. I don't know what kind of error it is. I don't know anything about that. So like I said, that is a general approach, but yeah. Okay. So the next one is, can we switch from web development to Android dev in Flutter? When you say Android development, I'm assuming you want to develop Android apps, but in Flutter. I'm assuming that I'm answering that question, right? So actually, web development is, so see, some historical context there is the team that developed Flutter was not the mobile team. It wasn't the Android team. It was the web team. It was a Chrome team. So a lot of the inspiration that was taken was actually taken from React. And because it was React, if you've especially worked on React, it is actually superbly easy for you to go to to Flutter. So it is quite nice. So can you go from web? Absolutely, you can. And also, I'll send you a resource. It is called Flutter for web developers that Flutter itself has, that gives you some knowledge into um, Flutter for and web dev. So essentially, if you're a web developer, what do you need to know? So that is a really nice resource to have if you're looking to switch from that. But absolutely, you can very easily switch from web development to Android dev, and actually it's one of the easiest things, because if you're used to especially React or React Native, like obviously React Native is not a web thing, but if you at least familiar with React, UI will be very easy. And UI is like, when you're new to Flutter, UI is actually the most difficult part, which actually becomes the most easy part later on, but like that's not so that's the thing. What I would suggest is first just go dig deep into the UI side, then go towards this thing. But the Android development side, right? So Flutter actually specifies very easily. Only thing is you have to follow instructions step by step, meaning a lot of stuff you need to make some changes on the Android side. Okay, as an example, maybe as a web developer, you don't know what the manifest is, or what a Gradle file is, or whatever, something like that, right? So you don't know what the rules of these individual files are. So you can't go and make very easy changes there. So just make sure that if there are any instructions there, just read through them very well. Make sure you're editing the right file, because there's 2 or 3 manifests in Flutter, there's 2 or 3 Gradle files in Flutter, like as not Flutter, in the Android project. So for a general Flutter app without native code, very easily you can shift. If there is something that requires something specific, meaning some native code, then just watch out. But then again, you can't develop that native app with web development anyway, so it's much better you do. And yeah, overall summing up, yes, you can very easily. For sure. Thanks so much. It was joy to be here, and just these kind of things I really wanted to share as well, because they're quite important when I do it. And I think I'm just reading the same thing as I think Kanishk. Okay. So the funny thing is, I'll just mention this one thing, right? So to Kanishk, it is, look, I have, out of all the people I've met, and I've met a lot of people, right? It's not a brag, but it's more like I've met a lot of people where it is like, I love asking people, what their story is, because nobody comes to if whatever their level of success is, right, small or large, they always have a story behind it, and that I love to actually hear that story, because it's all unique. And when you actually look at their lives, right, there has always been one part of their lives which they have worked extraordinarily hard, because of some circumstances, because they wanted to, because they felt inferior, whatever the reason is, that is not the point. But there has been one part of their lives which kind of comes, which they have worked harder than anybody else around them. And after that, you kind of take a break. So for me, that was like the beginning of my engineering. I'm not that old, like I passed out 2 years ago, but I mean, it's just that, I have been working since throughout my engineering. For example, I was working, and since first year I've been working with like international companies and stuff. So because I did not relate with any of the curriculum, I didn't like it. I always felt that, just learning the base curriculum won't do us any good. We are just the same as other people. We need to go beyond that. And for me, those 2 3 years, for other reasons as well, they were quite intensive. And after that, you kind of reach a point where you realize that you can't work like that forever. You have to slow down, you have to take a breath, and you have to ask yourself, can you be good at what you do and also have a life, right? So you have to ask yourself that question. And yeah, so initially I was really bad at time management, extremely bad. But after a while, you take a breath. There comes a point where you're like, I need to take a breath now. And when you realize that, you start going into some other things. So instead of basically spamming and brute forcing your hours, 10 15 hours a day, you realize, can I work for 5 or 6 hours but work in the best way possible? And that's when stuff like atomic habits, or stuff like a lot of stuff like like currently I'm on 2 tracks right now. One is like the atomic habits kind of time track, and one is like a more I won't say, I'm not sure if it's spiritual one, but it's more about the power of now kind of books, like the ending of time, the power of now, like those kinds of books. So there's 2 tracks I'm on currently, but it's just more like you come to a point where you realize, can I become the best person that I am without actually and have a life without spamming 15 hours a day? Because if you might be the best developer in the world tomorrow, but if you don't have a life, that's not going to be any use to you, right? You have to live as well. So I agree. It takes a lot of time being a developer and doing something. Having a life, it really depends. You have to make sure everything fits in well, right? I can't train as a pilot, for example, and be this, because that's also time consuming task. So I have people who do skydiving and stuff, which is, I am daunted by those kinds of people. That is a level way beyond me. But you have to make sure all the things that you do, they fit in together really well, and they can complement each other in a sense, and it gives you the respite you need. So yeah, I agree. Maybe you're in that phase where you're growing immensely, and in that phase it is very easy to worry about, can I actually, how will actually spend time with people? How will I go out? How will I do anything else if I have so much stuff here? And if you're, let's say, a college student, I'm assuming you are. If you're a college student, you already have what, 6 8 hours of college. I used to come home and work a lot from college, just purely because of how boring college was. And that's the main thing, right? Because you already have something that is quite intensive. That takes most of your day. Then maybe you come home and work on your own things, work on college things, and how much time do you realistically have left? That's fine. As you get out of it, you will realize you have the time. What you lack is the motivation later. So you have to make all of that into, like, you have to come to a stable place. And it is about finding that stable place, what it is for you. Again, I can't tell that to you because that is mine. Like, I'm not being possessive, but it's just more like, it is how I got to that place. It is not just about that place itself. So you had a very different life, obviously. And what stable place that is for you, you have to find out. And at some point, you have to come out of the competitive. I am a very competitive person, but you have to come out of that extreme competition that comes along with college, comes along with interacting with the community, because you see people who are doing so much stuff, and then you ask yourself, what am I doing, right? No matter how much you actually are, you might be doing a lot of stuff. So once you come out of the competitive loop, you kind of have to take a priority. And once your priorities are set, I actually think you can take at least, so I take at least 2 3 hours a day out of my whatever my tasks are, like either going to the gym, reading something, going out, whatever it is. I take at least 3 hours a day out, which I did not do earlier. It was difficult for me to stop. But yeah, over time it comes to you, and don't worry about it. Like, if you're in that phase, it's fine. That phase will pass. But you have to be mindful about what your priorities are. Don't just spam everything because you can. Don't learn everything because you can, because that is actually counterproductive. I hope that's a relatively fine answer. But yeah.
Actually, is it okay if I just unmute my mic to
Oh
follow
yeah,
up
sure,
on?
sure.
So yeah, as you said, this was something that was I was about to follow up on. That there are a lot of things in the pipeline that I have ready for me. I want to, get better at React, get better at Flutter, get better at Firebase. Oh my God, I'm missing out on opportunities. Blah blah blah. So how did like obviously I know you have a process. You just said that, but then along with college, when you were in college, were you the same? Like, how did you manage academics with the things that actually matter? Because I personally feel that the academics they teach don't matter at all. They are just wasting my time. So how did you like figure out the balance? of life there?
So no, I relate so much to the question you just asked. Trust me. It's I'll be honest. Like, first sem of my college, I studied. Okay, I actually studied. I got very good. Like I got like what 9.6, 9.7, so some very high, pointer initially. And I was like, I didn't really study that much. I mean, if I can do this in this much study, somebody else can easily get a 10. Okay. And there was some stuff happening in my life that, like, I just realized I need to get out of this, generic loop that people are in. Like, this, you have been taught, do this, do this, do this. And I didn't want, engineering to be just another step where I just, compete with everybody else for marks. And I didn't want that to be my life anymore. So initially, like I absolutely agree with you, that I felt that college was completely irrelevant, at least to my goals, right? Because college technically teaches you everything, right? Teaches is a very relative word, but like since this is a JDSC session, I'll just stop on the college discussion. But essentially, you have to take a priority, meaning you have to accept that I am going to follow something, and if that leads me to, like, if that leads to me ruining my academics, don't fail, but I mean, if it goes to, like, even if I get less marks because of it, I am okay with that, right? You can't criticize it and then study too much and, like, be okay, I got less marks. That is not how it works. You have to then set a priority. I basically told myself and my parents, I was like, look, I don't think this is where I want to be, and I don't think this competition is what I want. I want to be good, but not in this way. So I told them that, even if I get less marks, or if something happens to my academics, I am responsible for that. But this is a conscious. I am very mindful of the decision I'm taking. It is not something that's going to happen accidentally. And over time, I didn't lose I didn't go very low. My university wasn't that tough, but overall, it was something that I consciously took. That if I'm going to get less marks, so be it, because I wanted to use that time to actually gain experience elsewhere, which I felt at that time was much more valuable to me. See, today looking back, it's a very easy thing to, okay, that obviously that was the obvious decision. But at that time, I am very proud of the decision I made at that time, right? Because it was when at that point, it is very difficult to take it because you have no data. Today, I have that data. In hindsight, it's an amazing decision. But at that time, it is a very tough one. So if you're saying, okay, if you're calling your education, bad, then leave it. Leave it. I'm not saying drop out. Okay, I'm not saying going that far, because see, eligibility still matters, right? In a lot of companies. So keep your eligibility, keep a degree, but don't pursue it, and then make a very good thing about what you want to pursue. Meaning, you're saying you want to learn React, you want to learn Firebase. See, React Firebase can go hand in hand. That's fine. But everything else, as an example, tomorrow you're like, I want to learn ML as an example. Like, that won't go, right? So I'll tell you something very simply. Being good at one thing, be very, very good at one thing rather than being an expert in 5 things, right? That is what you have to do. Like, be really good at one thing. So if you want to learn React in 5 days, learn React in 5 days, but only learn React in 5 days. Be literally in the top 1% and then expand, because your competition is not in the bottom 50, bottom 80%. Okay. And I'll be absolutely honest. People on this call, or your college in general, that is not your competition. Okay. And if you beat them, okay. If you don't, that's fine. Okay. Don't worry about beating your peers. They are not your competition. You want to compete with somebody, compete with the top of the freaking world. Yeah. That is the only advice I'll give. Don't compete with people you can beat. That our brain likes to do that, right? Our brain likes to compare to our friends. I had amazing marks, so I had this thing. But if you compete with a higher, person who's very, very high, if you're Android, you might compete with Jake Walton, right? If you're in Flutter, compete with Remy, or whoever it is. Know your priorities. That, okay, I'm going to give less priority to my education because something else matters much more to me now. Be okay with the consequences of that. And then be very, very motivated to do the other thing you're going to do. So if you're going to learn React very well. If you're going to learn Firebase, know Firebase inside out. Create your own examples, know the people inside it, right? All of that you need to do very well. So I would suggest do that, but be mindful of that. And I'll be honest, I collected my degree 2-3 months ago. Nobody has ever asked for my degree. I've worked I've worked at or with 15 to 20 companies at this point. Not one person has asked me for my degree, because these are my work, right? If your work can talk for itself, you don't need to talk at all, right? Your degree does not need to talk, because your degree in the hands of a placement officer becomes just a sad competition between the people around you, and you don't want to be there because you will be beaten in that competition. That is not a competition you want to go into. That is a rat race. Get out of that. Be free. Be on your own. Create your own identity. Create your own things, and that is when you will transcend this placement kind of thing, and then you will go into that league where actual growth is present. So please, set your priorities, but be defined. Don't change later on. Okay, that is the one thing I'll advise. There is no changing after this. You're going to take this decision, but do not back out. That is the one thing I'll mention. Does that help? I know it's a bit scary, but it has to be. If it was easy to do, everybody would have done it. Understand that very well. If it was an easy experience, every damn person would have done it. It is difficult, and that's why it is rewarding, and that's why, you have to take that conscious decision. And I'll be honest, okay, after I did that, like in third and fourth year, I took my own Android lectures for my class because the teacher came to me. She's like, I don't know Android as well as you. Please take the lectures. I took a few of my lectures in Android because it was I gave more talks outside than inside. So things turn around, but assuming you take that effort, and you have to be committed after that. You can't let go. That is the main thing. Whatever it is, hurt through it, but go through it.
Thank you so much. Really, we need somebody who says these things out loud. Teachers won't, because that's not who they are. And I'm really happy to hear that your teachers actually give you the opportunity. I hope you got good marks in internal assessments as well after that. So great. Thank you so much for this. Thank you so much.
See, teachers are tied financially to that, right? As in, see, if you're a Wall Street trader, you're not going to advise crypto, right? That's the point. If you have financial interest involved, I'm not calling corrupt or anything, but you get the point, right? You have their interest, their job, and their livelihood side to that. You are trying to set up your future livelihood. That's why this kind of stuff matters to you, right? Tomorrow, if someone tells you and comes and tells you that this doesn't matter anymore, suddenly you will be offended to some reason, and it is acceptable, right? So, be very okay with that. And recently, I mentioned I was consulting at a company, and they were kind of disappointed with how their Android and iOS engineers were adopting Flutter slowly.
Mhm.
And I just told their person, I was like, look, you have invalidated all the knowledge that these people have had, and these are very experienced people. You are basically telling them to start from scratch, and it's a very difficult experience. You need to help them through it. You can't just be okay. Yesterday was doing Android and Swift, today I have to do Flutter. It doesn't work that way. These people who are experienced, genuinely known people in their community, it is difficult for them mentally to actually shift to this. So be okay with it. Be okay with some slow growth, and be nice to them, and that's when they'll grow. So that's the thing. You have to be mindful of what is happening around you, and whose interests are tied where, and just in your case, you're trying to set up your future as well. So it's okay. Look, people will disagree. That's fine. Okay, you are confident in your own thing. That the same teacher won't matter to you after 5 years.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and there's another question on YouTube. I am a native Android developer. Do you recommend that I should learn Flutter 2? And I've heard this question a lot, many times. People who are actually pursuing iOS or Android, a lot of them want to switch to Flutter just because they had a session, and it becomes confusing for me to explain it to them. So if you could brief it.
Right. So look, I'm not a person who is will be like, okay, 100% learn. Like it's not like that. The difference depends on the approach you're taking. Okay. So as an example, if you are an Android person, okay, meaning you I think like I was telling Kanesh, you have to be good at one thing. So if they want to be good at Android, then be good at Android. Then don't distract yourself. Then focus on Android, drill down, know every single concept, right? Then focus on it, stick to it. There's always going to be Android jobs, even if Flutter takes over. Okay, that's not going to be the question. So if that is your aim, then don't pivot unless there's a good reason. Like I said, I was completely burnt out when I discovered Flutter. It wasn't that, okay, I am already doing Flutter, I'm happy, I'm already doing Android, I'm happy with it. Then I switched to it. No, I was genuinely burnt out, and that's when I switched. If that is the situation, do it 100%. But don't do it if you started out with the intention of knowing Android very well, because then you're starting over. Then go to Android first, do it very well, then do it. Especially if you're doing it for a job, stick to Android. Okay, meaning it is better for you to be a very good person at Android rather than being a decent person at Flutter. Part two of this is like I mentioned, I'm a guy who likes building stuff that includes apps, packages, everything. If I want to publish an app, I need to publish it everywhere, right? So if you're a maker, if you're a builder of stuff, go for Flutter. Immediately go for Flutter, because your simple question here is that you can easily publish to everywhere. I can publish my app to Android, iOS, and whatever without having much more effort in it. And that's the thing. If you're going for expertise and a job, stick to Android. If you're still exploring, I would suggest you try out Flutter, at least see how it is. If you're a maker or a builder of some kind and you like building stuff, I would suggest you wholeheartedly go with Flutter, because it gives you much better reach and output capability in terms of platforms. So that is my overall answer. But yeah, if it was a generic question, I would say that, see, whatever happens, at least give Flutter a try. You don't like it, you don't like it. Okay, you are not going to agree with everything. But it is always helpful to give new tech a try, especially if it is related to your technology. So that is great. So yeah, that's the summary of the answer.
Okay, thank you. Also, can I ask you for one favor? Can you share your apps that are already published on Play Store, App Store, so that we could check them out?
Currently, actually, I'm okay. I'll just do a few. So currently, I'm actually focusing on my libraries and packages. So I'll say both links actually. As an example, I created a few. Like I created a gaming engine. I created like a custom paint kind of package, and I have a few pretty popular packages. So I'm currently focusing on that. Like this is my publisher. And then I do also have actually apps, but I don't remember. Like, I still have a few coming out actually. So let me see. So the Meta Flutter one I was talking about, so that as an example is it's an old app I have not tested recently, but this thing,
Okay.
like there's just a few links, and like recently I've been more into packages like libraries rather than apps, because libraries are used by a lot more people and it gains a lot more traction for you. So yeah, I mean apps mostly I do them for companies, so like it's more about them rather than my personal apps at the moment. But yeah, like if in the future if I ever give a session, I actually hope to have much more, because I want to go slightly more deeper into game development at some point in time. So if I have more, I'll send you links.
Okay, thank you so much. If any of the participants have any other questions, you all can ask. You can unmute yourself. Or if you don't have, I think we can have one last thing left, which is a group photograph. So all of you who can turn on their cameras, that would be really nice. So we could take a group photo. Everyone, Kanishk, Daksh, you all can turn on your videos. Kartike. It'd be really nice. Okay. Nice. Hi. Hi, Sukhbir.
Hello.
Hi, Daksh.
Hello.
So, Daksh actually has been a very consistent participant. So, I hope you learned a lot today, Kanishk.
Yes, I learned a lot today.
Great.
That was a very good session.
Okay. So, everyone, can you all turn on your videos? Okay. That's fine. I took a screenshot. Thank you again, Deven, for taking this session. And I think from on behalf of all of us, on behalf of whole GDSC, I am very thankful to connect with you and have you over for this session. I learned a lot. Everyone learned a lot, and I hope that we could learn more, get more from you in upcoming sessions. Yes, thank you. I'll repeat it again. I had reviews about you while you were giving the session. So that's very rare, and we are very happy to end the Flutter Festival 2022 for GTBIT on this good note. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Deven, again, once again. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. And yeah, I'm hoping your whole Flutter Festival went quite well with like 7
Yes.
sessions. That must be quite a lot.
Yes.
But yeah, like thanks to you and your organizing team for managing. And yeah, hopefully, more people come onto the Flutter side, like join the Dart side, like next time as well. And yeah,
Yes.
hoping to see you all again sometime soon.
Yeah. Thank you so much again. Have a good day. Bye
Bye, everyone.
bye.